Thanks so much for coming again to the latest in our All In how-to sessions. These are just to bring to life the actions as we announce them to the All In Action Plan. And yeah, just really thrilled with the engagement we've had from industry and this community that we're sort of building across these sessions as well. It's just really important to flag, I think, particularly with the panel we have today, that although all of the actions are driven by the data from the All In Census that we ran last year, we have also worked with, across all of the data, we've worked with relevant groups in the industry, all with a lived experience, to make sure that these are authentic and you know, they're really going to work. So, and I'm delighted to say that as last week's for gender, we've got some of the members of the working group that we've been working with on Asian talent over the last years. I'm delighted to I'll be introducing them in a minute. But before we jump in, Dan, as usual, from Kratos, is going to be sharing the relevant data with us. So I'm going to hand over to you without further ado, Dan, and then introduce our host for the panel.
Thanks, Sharon. Morning, everyone. Can everyone see that screen? Is that a yes?
That's a yes. Do you want to go on full screen, if possible?
Yeah, here we go. There we go. Sorry. Just as Sharon mentioned, I'm just going to run through some of the key findings in relation to those people that were identified as Asian in responding to the All In Census that was conducted in March last year. And just a quick reminder of the amazing response that we received. So 16,000 responses received across the industry. That was brands, agencies, and media owners. It's the largest response ever recorded in a survey for our industry. And as far as we know, it's the largest diversity and inclusion survey in the UK amongst any industry. And just to give a kind of an idea of the kind of the cost implication for that, we equated that response of 16,000 people equated to an investment of around £500,000 of the industry's time. So just to say, thank you to everyone that took part, and just to flag, what a real kind of monumental piece of research it was for the advertising industry. So just looking at representation of Asian people in the industry, overall representation in advertising aligns with the UK average. So 6.7% of the All In sample were Asian, which compares to a similar average of the UK working population, that is. But that does mask a number of issues in relation to Asian representation, retention, and lived experiences in the industry. And in terms of representation, there are two key areas where this kind of isn't reflecting the true picture. The first one is representation in the C-suite and at the very highest levels of the industry is low. So it drops from that's 6.7% to 3% at C-suite. So, there's obviously problems in progression and Asian representation at the highest levels. The second issue is Asian representation is not reflective of London. So we've done work with LinkedIn that suggests around 56% of people working in advertising are based in London, and 81% of the respondents to the survey were based in London. So that 7% Asian representation really is not reflective when you look at the Asian proportion of the London working population, which is 16%, and 7% of the general population. So clear areas for improvement there in terms of representation. It also varies greatly by function and department. So here on the left, we have the top 3 departments with the highest Asian representation. So IT, finance, and data analytics, they're all significantly higher than the 7% average for the industry. And on the right, we have the 3 functions or departments with the lowest Asian representation: account planning and strategy, creative, and media sales. And I think that split there kind of also, brings to mind we need to be aware of where Asian people are working in the industry and some routes that perhaps are less open or available. In terms of age, Asian representation is more heavily concentrated in the younger age groups. So compared to the all-in average, you can see that the Asian representation in the lighter blue is much higher, well, is higher at the 18 to 24, 25 to 34, and it's really at that 45 to 50, 45 plus age group that representation really seems to drop off for Asian people. And another finding we found that the people most likely to leave the industry from an Asian background were, the younger age groups, so 34 and under. Around 30% of those people said they were likely to leave the industry. Though representation received much of the focus and resource around addressing diversity and inclusion, many Asian people also experience barriers to progression, alienation, and demeaning behaviour in the workplace. I'm just going to run through some of the the real areas for concern and focus. So in terms of career progression, Asian people, a third of Asian people believe that race hinders career progression. Again, 37% felt undervalued compared to colleagues of equal competence. And around a quarter said they had faced obstacles in their career progression due to who they are. And all of those findings for the Asian respondents to the survey were significantly higher than their white colleagues and counterparts. And I think that career progression, this all links back to that low proportions that we're seeing in the C-suite. So looking at company culture, again, 61% of Asians feel they belong at their company, which is, again, significantly lower than the white proportion. A really telling one, this next stat, is that just 26% of Asians in the industry see people like themselves in senior positions, which is, as you can see, is absolutely miles away from the white proportion at 67%. And again, is a real key issue around progression and getting to those higher roles. And 28% of Asian people feel left out at work, both in work activities and social situations, which again is higher than the white proportion. Now, looking more at sort of worrying behaviour and demeaning behaviour, again, 16% of Asian people say they are bullied or undermined in the workplace. That's in the last 12 months as well. All of these stats are in the last 12 months. 10% have received verbal harassment or insults, and 15% have personally experienced racial discrimination. And again, if you compare that to the instances amongst their white colleagues, it far outstrips them. So final slide, and it just kind of shows that the culmination of all of these negative experiences means that almost 1 in 3 Asian people are likely to leave their company due to a lack of inclusion or discrimination. So that's 27%, and the equivalent figure for white people is 10%. So again, over double. And we also found that Asian women were more likely to say that they wanted to leave the industry than men. That was 29% versus 23%. So, really sobering figures there that really lead into the discussion that you're about to hear now. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Dan. Some really quite stark figures. I know they've been sort of really shocking for everyone that we've shared them with so far. I'm delighted to have so many of the working group that we've been working with over the last year for the panel. I'm going to hand over to the brilliant Supriya Dev Paketa who's going to host the panel. Just really grateful to all 3 of you for giving up so much of your time over the last year. But Supriya, hand over to you to intro who you're going to be in conversation with today to bring this to life.
Thank you, Sharon, and good morning to you all. Really thrilled to be here and hosting this brilliant panel who I'm going to introduce for you now. So we have Naren Patel, founder, Media for All, chair of the Asian Talent All In Working Group. Good morning, Naren.
Morning,
we also have, Sophia Hussain Parker, Inclusion, Equity and Diversity Director, EMEA Wonderman Thompson. Hi, Sophia.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Sophia.
And then we also have, last but not least, we have Conrad Scheck, Director of Policy Research, Advertising Association.
Hi there.
Hi. So look, it has been 9 months in the making, and I don't know about all of you, but I definitely feel like it's my baby. You know, I'm feeling really happy today, and it's great to see the product of those 9 months of work out there for everyone to make use of. Now, Naren, you brought me into this working group. I'm a member of MIFA, and a number of our colleagues also joined us. I'd really like you to kind of kick off with taking us through how the working group was set up and how the guide was developed.
Sure. Thanks, Sups. I mean, I think it all goes back to the census, and I remember Sharon calling me saying that they had looked at the data, and everyone expected the Black experience to be pretty awful in our industry. And I think what surprised people looking at the data was the Asian experience was not that far behind. And the industry had actually spent quite a lot of time post George Floyd working on things like the BRIM framework. Lots of companies had started D&I working groups and, you know, trying to improve the Black experience. And I think I just think the data really surprised everyone. So Sharon asked me if I would lead a working group on it, which of course I was honored to do. And we got a group of individuals. I tried to go as wide as possible because Asian is such a wide term. You know, billions of Asians out there, and we included, you know, people from, of course, you know, Hindus, Sikhs, Muslims, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka. We have people from the Philippines, people with Chinese backgrounds in. The whole idea was to really try and, you know, learn about our own experiences. And I think the thing that was common was everyone had experienced this sense of exclusion, but there were different degrees to it. For me, looking at the data, you know, the Muslim experience in particular was pretty awful. And then you know, you get this whole issue about, yeah, we've got lots of Asians, but yeah, they're stuck in IT and finance, and really at the sharp end, you know, they're missing really. It was really difficult. It was really difficult, you know, trying to find things that we could put together. And actually what we've created is something that's very broad. I'm just going to use one example. We were talking about holidays and companies, you know, making more of an effort to kind of encourage flexible working and allowing individuals to celebrate company holidays. And I said, listen, you know, for us, you know, for Hindus, Diwali is as important as Christmas. And, you know, maybe that's an area. And Sups piped up and said, well, I'm Bangladeshi Hindu, and actually it's the day after Diwali that's important for me. So this is not an easy, tick box. And I think the thing about this guide is, you know, we had 700 Asians respond to this survey, so it's a decent sample. And I think the first thing I'm asking businesses to do is engage with your employees and find out a bit more about them, and then use the framework. Otherwise, you'll just kind of make the mistake I made when I assumed that Supriya was celebrating Diwali on the same day that my family would be. So you know, engage, you know, understand lived experiences, because I think that's really important.
Thank you. And I think that was one of the important things, right? I think we had the largest group, from what I understand, when we last discussed it. So I think we had about 11 or 12 people in the working group. And that was the largest of all the working groups. And, you know, like you said, one of the things that featured throughout all of those group discussions, I think we got together about 12 times, was the differences and the similarities in our lived experiences. You know, I'd like to go to Conrad and ask if you could tell us a little bit about your own lived experiences and how that has affected you in the workplace.
Thanks, Supriya. Good morning again, everyone, and real pleasure to be part of this panel. I think it's a really important initiative. So today I just wanted to focus my remarks on basically 3 points, like challenging assumptions, building resilience, and embracing differences. So I wanted to begin by saying I'm somewhat of an anomaly here. I don't know if anyone can guess what that anomaly is. So the anomaly is that I've never worked in the ad industry. I bet some of you were thinking that I'm going to make some comment about the fact that I'm East Asian heritage on a mostly South Asian panel. No. But anyway, even at the Ad Association now, I actually work on policy research, not actually advertising per se. So whilst I can't really talk about specific experiences in the ad industry, I wanted to share some of my lived in experiences, which I hope others may be able to relate to. So I've had my fair share of racist discriminatory incidents growing up, working in the UK. I've been called a chink, Ching Chong Chinaman, a communist. I've had people pulling their eyes in front of me, tell me to go home, make Bruce Lee Kung Fu noises too. Some comments made in jest, some said aggressively. Most said out on the street, but there's been a few occasions that's happened in the workplaces that I've worked at. But you know what? Scary that it was for me younger, I think about these incidents now, and funny enough, it doesn't make me upset. My dad experienced a lot worse during the 1960s Britain, coming over from Hong Kong. But the reason why it doesn't make me upset, because at least I know where I stand with these people. Where I tend to get more upset is about behavior from people who I expect better from. I've often thought about why they behave the way they do. We behave the way we do because fundamentally we're shaped by our life experiences, our parents, and our environments. And this is why I think we're prone to making assumptions, stereotyping people, because it's based on our heuristics, which have been shaped by those factors. So for example, I used to work in the China department of the Foreign Office. And the interesting thing was that the department's head PA actually thought I was a secondee from the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs, an assumption. Also, when I spent time in Shanghai, I was based there for nearly 5 years, a number of British business people at chamber events would comment how good my English was. Another assumption. I'd also tell them that being born and educated in the UK definitely helped my English. But here's the thing, they're not the only ones making assumptions. For those who didn't know me until now and haven't actually looked at my LinkedIn profile, who would have thought that I used to work at the UK Foreign Office? Or that my mum was born in Kingston, Jamaica, and still has a slight Jamaican twang. And in case you're wondering, she's not black, but ethnic Chinese. But don't worry, my dad likes to tell the story of how his mum, my grandma, was convinced at one stage that she was getting married to a black woman until she saw a photo of my mum. So this was a case of village gossip turning into a serious case of Chinese whispers. And I'm guilty of making assumptions too. I might have thought that some people at events were deliberately ignoring me, only to realize that they were painfully shy or never had the pleasure of talking to such a charming person like me. But I've sometimes thought that maybe they don't want to talk to me because they're worried about saying something which might unintentionally offend me. This is the problem of assuming. So the only true way, I think, to deal with this is to challenge them and create safe spaces to talk about anything. We never get to know the true person until you talk to them. And it's so important to create those safe experiences where anything can be discussed. We can learn so much from each other. But this leads me to my second point. It's quite easy to view things through the prism of discrimination and racism. And my advice is not to. If you think that every disappointment or rejection is due to racism, then I'm afraid you probably won't get very far. You might be able to dabble with some plastic surgery, but fundamentally you can't change your DNA. And this is why I think building resilience is really important. I like to use these setbacks to drive and motivate me. I must and I will do better. And it might seem a bit unfair that you have to work harder than your white contemporaries, but at the end of the day, why not? Why not be better instead of settling to being the same? And I think thinking like this at least gives me the illusion that I have some degree of control of my destiny, as opposed to feeling like my career is a foregone conclusion due to the color of my skin. And it's also really important to note that might not be possible to overcome certain advantages that some of your local white contemporaries might have. And it's that they have personal networks, which ordinarily would have taken a generation to two to create. So the alternative I see is to work hard to prove how exceptional you are, mixed in with a bit of patience and some luck too. So my final point is that I've learned to embrace my differences and to feel comfortable who I am. I grew up feeling confused about my identity. Desperate to fit in as a kid, I found my culture embarrassing to talk about to my school friends. But when I did become more in tune with my culture, I was desperate to find more people like me, but I found I didn't quite exactly fit in with them because, for instance, I didn't speak perfect Cantonese, especially amongst the Hong Kong community. So who exactly was I? Well, I came to the realization that I have a British Chinese identity, a fusion of cultures. And by the way, I became fluent in Mandarin Chinese instead. But sometimes trying too hard to be something you're not can often lead to disappointment. And it's the idea that you could work so long and so hard to ingratiate yourself to gain acceptance amongst your white counterparts, but that one word or one action can feel so jarring. It's a painful reminder that you're different. So the point I would say is that if you embrace your differences, maybe those reminders may not be so painful. So that's the end of me.
Thank you, Conrad. And you know what? As you were speaking, there were so many memories that came up of my own, and like I've written down notes. But you know, just going back to talking about how you now identify as, you know, British Chinese. A friend of mine wrote a piece recently and kind of referred collectively to us as the third culture child. And, you know, the fact that I have a Bengali heritage, a Bangladeshi heritage, but actually for years I used to go around saying I'm Indian because my parents didn't have anything here that resembled any of their Bangladeshi culture. And so I grew up on Bollywood. For ages, I thought I was Indian. And of course, if we go back into history, yes, I was Indian at some point. But you know, but also I'm British, and I grew up in this kind of dual life where I was British outside and Bengali/Indian at home, and finding that identity is actually really, really difficult. You know, and it was great that you talked through the assumptions that people made and guiding their expectations and their responses to you. And I really heard you on that whole resilience piece and working harder. It's quite tiring though, isn't it? Working that hard and trying to be better than everyone all the time. And I think on my side, where you referred to seeing things through the prism of racism, I actually went the other way. So when I was younger, it's called Packy and, you know, smelly and whatever else. And I actually got into fist fights as well. To protect myself. But as I got older, I was like, no, this is, and I internalized it all. And nothing was racism. It was just me. It was people's responses to me. And that was a difficult thing to take. But, you know, like Sophia, we've talked extensively in our groups about the similarities and the commonalities. That was a thing that we really wanted to pull out, right? Was the commonalities of this vast group of people who come from so many different angles and dimensions that make us. We talked about patterns of migration affecting our lived experiences, and actually how in my community alone, I think I've got 3 different types of Bangladeshis now because of the patterns of migration and where they've come from in Bangladesh to where they come from now. You know, can you help us understand some of the similarities and differences between Asians that you encountered through those groups and also just through your kind of day-to-day?
Thanks for asking, Supriya. Great question, and good morning, everyone. This is such an important discussion. Thank you, Naren, Supriya, Sharon, Conrad, for setting this panel up for such a deep discussion. Much, you know, I think every time we connected over the last 9 months, we got into such a great conversation, and we didn't know where to start again because, you know, we explored so many different topics. But in reference to your question and in benefit, you know, for benefit of the discussion today, let's note down, and I think this has already been brought up by everyone who's spoken, that, you know, not all Asians are the same. So let's kind of set that foundation understanding. There is diversity within Asians. We come from South Asia, East Asia. It's a large continent that represent people from so many different countries, right? So when you recognize that intersectionality of race, of ethnicity, and layer that with religion, there are differences between the groups. And to be aware of these nuances and how they show up in the day-to-day lives is really important. For instance, I think, Supriya, you've touched on this, and Dan, you did it right at the start when you're presenting the data. If you are a Bangladeshi, you're more likely to suffer from stress and anxiety. Once again, if you're a Bangladeshi, you're more likely, along with Pakistanis, to have a significantly different experience and feel more excluded from the industry than if you are Indian or identify as Chinese or other Asian. So, and that consequently means when you feel excluded, you're not giving your best self in the workplace. It means you are not engaged. Your morale is suffering. You are more likely to not take part in employee, engagement initiative, all these things that organizations are working so hard to do to drive that culture of belonging and psychological safety. Let's talk about the Muslim experience. Naren, you touched on it in terms of, the data does give us some troubling insights into why the Muslim experience is so much significantly different, why Muslims are not being as included. As a Muslim myself, how many more times do I have to talk about the fact that yes, I don't drink. Nothing's changed from the last social event. I still don't drink. And when I say I want a vegetarian option, it's because I don't feel empowered enough to say, actually, I want halal option. Or you can't serve me vegetarian option next to the bacon rolls. Or the fact, yes, it is Ramadan for 1.8 billion Muslims around the world for a month. We're not fasting for the whole month. We're fasting from sunrise to sunset. And yes, there is ways the organizations can be inclusive by minor tweaks in your day-to-day working life, right? Be it the hours, be it incorporating breaks, for prayer times. So all this is exhausting. It does lead to fatigue. And yes, to Conrad's point, it does lead to building another layer of resilience, unlike some other groups, The good news is that we're talking about this. We've got data now, we've got insights. And what I love about this conversation is that we really want to move from intent to action and work really hard in enhancing the experience of all Asians. And we can't really do this without some courageous conversations that sometimes get a bit uncomfortable, because the Asian experience is one that is of discrimination. There is racism. And a result of all this, there's 40% of Asians that feel significantly undervalued. Interestingly, Dan, I think it was in one of your slides at the start, you saw there is, quite a good Asian workforce coming in at the younger level, right? So what's telling us is we're not having an issue attracting Asian talent, because sometimes we do default to, we just don't have the talent. But actually, we do have Asian talent. The issue is we're not retaining them. And then there is a noticeable pattern when it comes to occupation segregation that's happening in our organizations, right? So Asians, in fact, are overrepresented in support roles such as IT and finance, whilst almost completely missing in creative, art buying, media, strategy roles. Now, why is this troubling? Because it actually goes to show the patterns, right? Which, Supriya, you were talking about, in terms of how are Asians viewed. So there is danger that we're playing into the stereotype of being in service roles, in roles that support us, to do better in our jobs, but not necessarily in roles where decisions are being made, where there are budget holders, where they are owning the seat at the most senior level. I mean, how else, I guess, do we explain the lack of representation, or as the data says, 3% of C-suite leaders in advertising are in fact Asian? We add all of this, the layer of religion, the intersectionality between religion and race is significantly contributing factor in this group's feelings of exclusion. For instance, if you happen to be, like I said, if you happen to be a Pakistani or Bangladeshi, if you happen to be a Pakistani Muslim or Bangladeshi Muslim, then you are more likely to get discriminated against. So I guess, just to conclude on, we shouldn't assume that all Asians are the same, but there is there is commonality in the experiences, and why I think it's really important that we lead with curiosity and listen and ask the questions to truly understand, how is it that we create conditions of belonging and truly set our talent up for success so they do thrive and they do stay within the industry.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that, Sophia. Just before I go on, I should have actually explained at the beginning, Conrad had another engagement. He's so much in demand. So he's had to jump off. He hasn't left in disgust or anything like that. Simply had another engagement. But I think all of those things bring back all of those conversations that we had, and there's so much to unpick. I think that's one of the things that we really found, is there's so much to unpick. And one of the things that we were discussing, and we had a really long debate on this, was we didn't want to produce another complicated framework, or be a burden. I think that's probably the Asian way as well, isn't it? We don't want to be a burden. We just want to get on with our work, and we want to be able to pave a way for ourselves. We all are ambitious. Everyone's ambitious. Asians are no less ambitious than anyone else. And what we want is a way to be able to feel that like we belong, that we have a place in this industry, that we can achieve the heights that we were told that we could achieve when we were younger, and all that sort of stuff. And I think one of the things that has come out, if you look at the guide, you'll see that it's actually quite simple. And that's one of the things that we really focused on, is the commonalities rather than the differences, because if we can tackle the commonalities, we'll be able to support a wider group of people than if we just focus in on the differences. But we need to be mindful of the differences, because there is a piece around personalization on this as well. I mean, there's been a lot of talk for ages. I think, was it the McGregor-Smith report, in itself said that there's a lot of evidence that diversity brings innovation, profitability, and growth in revenue. And we're all business people. We're all attached to businesses that want to grow, and attached to, wanting to grow ourselves. And so it makes sense to make sure that we, as the advertising industry, can have a diverse workforce. We also, my own opinion, impact people outside the industry, media that we put out there, with the advertising that we put out there. And in order for us to cater for everyone and do our jobs properly, we always actually need to have diversity of thought ourselves and have those lived experiences. So, if you take a look at the guide, you'll see that it's about opening up those necessary conversations, about being curious. Just ask the conversation. We're not expecting our employers to have the answers. We are expecting them to take an interest in us, and we're expecting them to be curious and ask us, and also listen, actively listen. If you have seen the spelling of my name, you might be tempted to call me Shapriya or Supriya or whatever. I might then correct you and say, well, no, there's an invisible H in that, and it's Shapriya. Take note of that. Write it down phonetically if that helps you, but actively listen, actively engage in the feedback you're getting. And make that conscious effort to make sure that you're trying to make changes. We've talked a bit about the dual lives that we often lead, and that's because some of us, I didn't for many years, feel like we could be our authentic selves. And it's simple things like, I never watched Modern Family, and there'd be loads of jokes around it, right? Because I was watching Asian TV and my favorite programs on at the same time. But I would sit there and laugh at the jokes that I didn't get, because I didn't want to feel excluded. But I could never talk about the stuff that I was watching, because no one else knew. Now I'm quite happy being my authentic self. And I can tell you, I've got a lot more energy for the work that I do now, because I'm not having to always think about how should I be responding to this. I can just be my natural self and my authentic self. But I've had to do a lot of work personally on myself to be able to be like that, and be able to be authentic and not feel like I'm being judged. So creating space for people to be themselves, for them to feel like they'll be accepted as their authentic selves is really interesting. One thing you can do to do that is ask them things like Naren said. Ask them, is there a religious day that you'd like to take off? Is there a bank holiday you want to swap? They're simple constructs. It's not about giving anyone extra holidays. And actually, if everyone else is getting religious holidays off, why should someone be expected to take their holiday as religious day? It's not fair. There are loads of bank holidays. We're in the advertising world. Our clients want us to work bank holidays because, let's face it, that's when the sales are on, right? So isn't it actually better for business if we say anyone that wants to work a bank holiday and, you know, switch it out for a religious day, come and tell us? Or when you're onboarding someone, which is probably the best time to do it, ask them, are there any specific days you'd want to have off? And, you know, would you like to swap them for a bank holiday? I think we've seen some comments in the chat that a Group M are doing this already. They're happy to share their policy. Let's share and learn from each other and see how we can make people feel more comfortable with talking about their needs. And then again, you know, like I said at the very beginning, this is tackling the common themes that we saw, but we do need to be able to go a little bit deeper and ask the questions of, you as your unique self, what do you need? I mean, I'm quite open now about my experiences. I did suffer from stress and anxiety and massive anxiety. And I actually, off my own back, had to do lots of coaching and counseling. And I was strong enough to go to my management team and went, you're not supporting me. I need this to do my job better. Please get me this support. I can tell you, I needed that 10 years ago. And it took me about 8 years to ask for it. That's 8 years where I wasn't performing at my best. And it hindered me in my career. So, you know, I think taking the stigma out of those conversations and those questions is really, really important. And I'm glad to say that there's a lot more awareness on mental health at the moment, but there's still in the communities a lot of stigma attached to them. And I think that's what we need to recognize, is actually which communities need a bit more support in unlocking and breaking down that stigma. And then, of course, we've got the Great Resignation at the moment. And we've just heard Dan talk about 30% of young Asians who we've worked really hard to bring into the industry want to leave. That's a lot of money that's gone into bringing these people in and training them up. And now we're going to have to bring in more. And I think, you know, and it's not just for Asian talent, it's for everybody. You know, if we can retain our talent, if we can ensure that they're included and belong and retain them, then they will start to progress. They will be the leaders of tomorrow. And that representation will start to come. I mean, we do need to do something about representation in the meantime, but we also need to make sure when we're bringing all this talent in, let's retain them. Let's make them feel included and wanted, and, you know, create a safe space for them and a nurturing environment for them to be in. So I think, you know, that's what I hope everyone takes away from the work that we've done and the guides that have been produced. But I'd like to go to any questions, and actually before that, if there's any other comments from the panel, please do feel free to add in.
Yeah, so if I could just remind everyone that these might not be your employees that answered this survey, you know, or we only had 700, and yours might be, maybe you're lucky and your experiences are better for your employees, or they're worse. And I think the first thing is a responsibility to go and find out, how are they feeling, because I think that's really important. Engage with your teams, really.
Sophia, did you want to add anything to that? You're mute.
Yeah. To have those conversations, be led with curiosity, and I think nobody wants to be othered. Soups, you've talked about this. We don't perform our best when we are othered. So why is it that we want to work in or set up people in a way that they're having to code switch when they come into work? Creativity is our currency. We work in the creative industry. So why is it we want to not, we want to unleash that creative power that exists in each and every one of us? So I think this benefits the organizations, it benefits teams, it benefits the culture that, we talk about, and it benefits you as individuals. So I think it's kind of win-win for everyone.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Couldn't agree with you more. Thank you for your time, guys. We're going to open up for questions, I believe. Sharon, you're going to take it.
Yeah, absolutely. Has anyone got any questions for the panel? I just wanted to say thank you as well, because as ever, these conversations are just so inspiring. I always learn something. Even though, as you said, we've met maybe 12 times over the last year, it's just such rich insight. And I could see that Shez and Mahir on the call as well. So thanks to you guys for being part of this work. Yeah, are there any questions? I know it's a huge topic, but even on the practical side, I mean, is there one thing that you would flag, companies can do out of that guide? I mean, as you said, Naren, it's really simple, and that's the aim of the whole All In plan, is that everything is a very simple call to action, so there's kind of nowhere to hide for people. But is there one thing within the guide that would really make a difference if people started with that?
I mean, for me, I'd definitely, Ramadan's coming. It's around the corner, and I just think it's a good time for companies to start thinking about it. Our Muslim colleagues, it's a very special time of the year for them. Let's try and understand it. Let's give them space. I mean, with so many people still working from home, hopefully we can, free up some prayer rooms, or, I think it's about engaging and finding what's important to people who work for us.
Sophia, have you got anything to add? Any of the sort of guide?
Yeah.
Jump out.
One of the things that I talked about is the holidays thing, but beyond that, I think Sophia was talking about how, she doesn't drink alcohol, and she's not going to drink alcohol, and that's not changed. And actually, one of the things that we collect a lot of information when we onboard people, but I don't think we go into personal preferences like food and beverage, and just being able to ask the question on a questionnaire from the very beginning and part of a HR process. I think that means that the initial onboarding is already inclusive and already being mindful of, the need for halal or kosher food, or the need for, I don't eat beef and nothing with beef gelatin in it. So, I want to be able to write that. At the moment, every time I'm asked for dietary requirements, it's just one line that I paste in, no beef products. And I think, if you can have a database of that, how much easier would it be for you, right? You get the catering and you go, right, we've got 15 people that need halal, we've got 10 people that need kosher, these people that don't eat beef. What can we bring in that means that people are not excluded from food items? Because I tell you, it gets really boring if you are a meat eater, but all you can eat is the vegetarian, because you have no idea whether it has a product that you're not going to eat in it. So I think, rethink your onboarding process, and what are the questions you could be asking at the very beginning that could make that very initial, experience into the business a really meaningfully inclusive experience.
Thanks, Sue. And very, very quickly in the last minute, thanks, Mahir, for your question, and thanks for all your work on this. Anything that you've seen, any changes that you've seen? Maybe let's stick on one that's for better, to end on a positive. Is there a thing that you've seen change in the industry in the last few years for the better? Or maybe not, maybe this is the better.
No, listen, honestly, I mean, having, been in the industry for 30 years, I can honestly say I never talked about Diwali. It was never celebrated, it was never discussed. And, I'd say recently, over the last 4 or 5 years, people are bringing sweets in, people are talking about it. So I think things are definitely improving, and there is curiosity around it. I just think we need to up the pace, really. So, I think we've got to recognize that, we are changing as an industry. I think we just want to all change a bit faster, really.
I think that's the banner we put above the guide, isn't it? Be curious. I think that's such a great, the intersectionality around that is so perfect for this work as well, because actually the ultimate aim of All In is for everyone to feel they belong in UK advertising. And I think there's so much of this guide that's going to ripple out to other minority communities in the industry, and just hopefully we can all lift from that. So Listen, thanks again. Thanks so much to you, Suits, for chairing that so brilliantly, and for all the work over the last year. It's just the beginning, really, isn't it? I think we've always said that. But as we've said in all of these sessions, we're going to reconvene in a few months' time with this group. It'd be great to see how things are progressing now that we've announced the action, and we're going to be working really proactively with our members, IPA and ISBA members as well, to get everyone to adopt the plan with the 6 actions so far. So they can become all-in champions in June when we announce the list. So yeah, thanks again for everyone to turning up to these sessions. We'll see you again. We haven't quite got the date yet for the ageism one, but like this, we can promise another very insightful conversation. But thanks so much for sharing. I mean, it's an incredibly personal subject, obviously, and it's just been really amazing to hear you sharing your story. So thank you. And speak to you really soon. Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.